There's something about small villages that feels timeless, don't you think? Like the world spins forward, but they remain anchored in a quiet, unchanging rhythm. Elias's village was one of those places, cradled by rolling hills and dense, ancient forests that seemed to murmur secrets when no one was listening. The air carried the scent of pine and earth, and the wind wove through the trees long before it brushed your face. At the center of it all stood the farmhouse, a weathered, two-story haven with a wide porch that gazed out over a meadow stretching toward the horizon. Elias's mother, Clara, was the heartbeat of that home. She had a gift for breathing life into everything around her, as if the world were a song she alone could hear. Her treasure? The wind chimes. Dozens of them dangled from the porch. Bamboo, metal, seashells, each with its own distinct voice. Every evening, she'd settle into her rocking chair, eyes shut, swaying to their gentle music. To her, they were more than ornaments. They were alive. "They're the earth's lullaby," she'd tell Elias, her voice warm and lilting. "Listen close, and you'll hear the world singing to you." 7-year-old Elias drank in those words. He'd perch at her feet, enchanted, believing the chimes held magic, a chorus of safety, a promise of peace. Back then, the porch was his kingdom, and the chimes were its guardians. But peace, as life often proves, is a fleeting thing. It was late autumn when the storm struck. Not a gentle rain, but a feral tempest, raw and relentless. The sky churned with coal-black clouds, and the wind roared like it meant to rip the village apart. Inside, Elias crouched with his family, the house groaning under the onslaught. The wind chimes, once so soothing, turned frantic, clashing and shrieking, their song warped into a cry of alarm. Then came the lightning. A blinding flash split the night, followed by a thunderclap that rattled the bones of the earth. Elias yelped, but the storm devoured his voice. Beside the porch, an ancient tree, tall and steadfast, cracked in two, its trunk slamming down with a force that smashed the railing and sent the chimes flying. Fragments of glass and metal rained across the yard, their music snuffed out in an instant. Clara, ever fearless, darted outside to survey the wreckage. Elias's father yelled for her to stop, but she vanished into the storm's maw. Then, another bolt. Elias saw it through the window, a spear of light, his mother's silhouette, and then silence. She crumpled to the ground, gone before the echo faded. The wind screamed louder, as if grieving, and the rain fell like a shroud over the world. The days after blurred into a haze of sorrow. The village rallied, bringing casseroles and kind words, but Elias drifted through it all, unmoored. The porch, once his refuge, lay in ruins, a splintered tomb for his shattered childhood. Without the chimes, the silence felt wrong, heavy with absence. But it wasn't just the quiet that gnawed at him. It was what came next. A week after the funeral, Elias jolted awake to footsteps in the hall, soft, measured, pacing just beyond his door. He called for his father, but the house stayed still. Peering out, he found nothing but shadows. The next night, whispers crept in, muffled, fleeting, like voices on the wind. He told himself it was grief twisting his mind, but the doubt lingered. Then the shadows started. Flickers at the edge of his sight, vanishing when he turned. Objects shifted, a book flipped open, a chair nudged out of place. His father, lost in his own pain, dismissed it as distraction. But Elias knew something was there watching. One evening, as the sun sank and painted the sky in fiery streaks, Elias sat on the porch steps, staring at the meadow. The air hung still. The world paused. Then, at the forest's edge, he saw it, a figure, cloaked in darkness, standing motionless. It didn't approach, didn't speak, but its stare pierced him, icy and unrelenting. He blinked and it vanished. Oh, and if this tale's hooking you, why not subscribe to my YouTube channel? Our little crew's growing fast. Honestly, it's been a wild ride, and I'd love for you to join us. Now, back to Elias. That night, the figure invaded his dreams, a faceless specter looming close, whispering words he couldn't grasp. He woke drenched in sweat, pulse racing, and knew he couldn't ignore it anymore. At breakfast, he spilled it all to his father. The footsteps, the whispers, the shadow in the trees. His father listened, frowning, then sighed. "Elias," he said softly, "it's just your head playing tricks. Grief does funny things." But Elias wasn't swayed. He'd felt that gaze, heard those sounds, and his mother's words echoed. They're the earth's lullaby. What if the chimes were more, a shield against something darker? Desperate for answers, Elias rifled through Clara's things. She'd loved folklore, collecting tales of the strange and mystical. In her study, he found a journal, pages brimming with wind chime sketches, each marked with odd symbols. One note stopped him cold. The chimes keep the silence at bay. Without them, the whispers grow louder. His stomach dropped. Had she known? Were the chimes a safeguard? The journal offered no clear answers, but it sparked a theory. Maybe they'd held something back, something now seeping into the house. That night, Elias resolved to act. He couldn't revive his mother, but he could reclaim her legacy. In the attic, he gathered the chimes' broken remnants, shards of glass, twisted metal, determined to rebuild them. If they'd protected once, they might again. But as he worked, the air thickened. Shadows stretched unnaturally, and a chill slithered up his spine. Then, from the attic's corner, came a sound, a faint, eerie tinkling, like a wind chime's ghost. There was no breeze, no cause, yet it grew, swelling into a chaotic jangle that echoed the storm's fury. Elias froze, heart hammering. The noise filled the room, wild and pleading, then cut off abruptly. In the ringing silence, he felt it, cold breath on his neck, a whisper in his ear. "You can't bring them back." He whirled around, but the attic was empty. The chime fragments glinted at his feet, mocking him. Trembling, he stumbled back, the truth crashing down. This wasn't just grief. Something real, something old and ravenous, had slipped in when the chimes fell. The wind chimes had been his mother's gift, her barrier. Now, without them, the house was open, and whatever waited in the dark was waking up. There's a strange comfort in the familiar, isn't there? Even when it's broken. Elias clung to that thought as he stared at the shattered wind chime fragments scattered across the attic floor. The ghostly tinkling had stopped, but its echo lingered in his mind, a warning, a plea, or perhaps a taunt. He wasn't sure. What he did know was that the house felt different now, as if the air itself had thickened, pressing in on him from all sides. He couldn't stay in the attic, not with that whisper still crawling under his skin. "You can't bring them back." The words replayed in his head, cold and final. But Elias wasn't ready to surrender. His mother had believed in the chime's power, and so would he. Downstairs, the house was quiet, too quiet. His father had left for town, seeking solace in routine, leaving Elias alone with his fears. The boy wandered from room to room, searching for something, anything, that might explain what was happening. His mother's study beckoned, its shelves lined with books on folklore and the arcane. Clara had always been drawn to the mystical, collecting stories like treasures. Maybe, just maybe, she'd left a clue. Elias pulled the journal from the shelf again, flipping through its pages with trembling hands. Sketches of wind chimes filled the margins, each one adorned with symbols he didn't recognize. One entry caught his eye. The chimes are a ward, a melody to soothe the restless. Without them, the silence invites what should not be. His breath hitched. A ward? Against what? He turned the page, but the next entries were mundane recipes, gardening notes. Frustration welled up, but he kept searching. In a drawer, buried beneath old letters, he found a small, leather-bound book. Its cover was worn, the title faded, Legends of the Hollow. The Hollow. That was what the villagers called the forest beyond the meadow, a place of whispered tales and unspoken rules. Children were warned to stay clear, especially after dark. Elias had never questioned why. It was just the way things were. But now, with a shadow figure lurking at its edge, he needed answers. He cracked open the book, scanning the yellowed pages. The legends were strange and varied, tales of lost travelers, eerie lights, and voices that lured the unwary. One story, though, made his blood run cold. It spoke of a spirit, ancient and vengeful, bound to the forest by a pact long forgotten. The spirit fed on sorrow, slipping into homes where grief had opened a door. But there was a catch. It feared music, especially the pure, resonant tones of wind chimes. Elias's heart raced. Could this be it? Had his mother known? The journal's words clicked into place. The chimes were a ward, their music a barrier against this entity. When they broke, the door swung wide open. But why his family? Why now? The answer hit him like a punch: his mother's death. The spirit thrived on sorrow, and their home was drowning in it. He slammed the book shut, pulse pounding. If the legends were true, he needed to restore the chimes, fast. But the fragments were ruined, and he didn't know how to craft new ones. Desperation clawed at him. There had to be another way. That night, Elias lay awake, the house creaking around him. Every shadow seemed alive, every gust of wind a whisper. He'd barricaded his door with a chair, but it felt futile. Sleep was impossible. Then, just past midnight, he heard it, a soft, deliberate tapping at his window. Tap, tap, tap. He froze, eyes locked on the glass. The tapping grew insistent, rhythmic, like a finger beckoning. Slowly, he crept to the window and peered out. There, at the forest's edge, stood the figure again, tall, shrouded in darkness, its face hidden. It raised a hand, pointing directly at him. Elias stumbled back, heart hammering. The figure didn't move, but its presence was suffocating, as if it were inches away, breathing down his neck. He squeezed his eyes shut, willing it to disappear. When he looked again, it was gone. But the tapping continued. It wasn't coming from the window. It was inside the house. Elias's blood turned to ice. The sound echoed from the hallway, slow and deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Then a low, guttural hum, a voice, wordless and ancient, seeping through the walls. He couldn't stay here. Not alone. Not with that thing prowling the halls. Grabbing a flashlight, he slipped out of his room, creeping toward the stairs. The hum followed, always just behind him, never closer, never farther. He reached the front door, threw it open, and bolted into the night. The meadow stretched before him, bathed in moonlight. The forest loomed ahead, dark and foreboding. Elias hesitated. The hollow was dangerous, but so was the house. Maybe the answers lay within those trees, perhaps even a way to banish the spirit. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, crossing the boundary into the woods. The forest swallowed him whole. Branches clawed at his clothes, and the air grew thick, almost suffocating. He flicked on the flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. The path was narrow, winding, and unfamiliar. Every snap of a twig made him jump, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. Then, in the distance, he saw it, a faint, flickering light, dancing between the trees. It wasn't steady like a lantern. It pulsed, erratic and otherworldly. Against his better judgment, Elias followed it, drawn like a moth to a flame. The light led him to a clearing where an ancient oak stood, its gnarled roots twisting like serpents. At its base lay a circle of stones, each etched with symbols matching those in his mother's journal. And there, hanging from a low branch, was a single wind chime, small, delicate, its tubes gleaming in the moonlight. Elias's breath caught. It was identical to the ones his mother had cherished. But how? Who had placed it here? Before he could ponder, a voice slithered through the air, low and mocking. You seek to rebuild what was broken. He spun around, but saw no one. The chimes swayed gently, though there was no breeze. Show yourself, Elias demanded, voice trembling. Laughter echoed, cold and hollow. You are brave, child. Or foolish. The air shimmered, and the figure from the meadow materialized before him, tall, cloaked, its face obscured by shadow. Up close, It reeked of decay, of things long dead. "What do you want?" Elias whispered. The figure tilted its head. "What I have always wanted. To feed." Elias's stomach churned. "On sorrow?" "On life," it corrected. "But sorrow makes the door easier to open." The chime above them tinkled softly, and the figure flinched, retreating a step. Elias's eyes widened. It feared the sound. "You can't stay here," he said, emboldened. "The chimes will keep you out." The figure hissed, its form wavering. "One chime is not enough. You know that." It was right. The house had been filled with them, a symphony of protection. A single chime wouldn't suffice. But maybe it was a start. Elias lunged for the chime, yanking it from the branch. The figure shrieked, a sound like nails on glass, and the forest erupted into chaos. Shadows writhed, trees groaned, and the ground trembled beneath his feet. Clutching the chime, Elias ran, the entity's wails chasing him through the trees. Branches slashed at his face, roots snagged his ankles, but he didn't stop. Not until he burst from the forest, back into the meadow, the house looming ahead. He collapsed on the porch, gasping for breath. The chime lay cradled in his hands, its soft, steady song cutting through the night. For now, the entity was gone, but Elias knew it wasn't defeated. It was merely waiting, biding its time. He had to rebuild the chimes, all of them. But how? The fragments were useless, and he lacked the skill to craft new ones. There was only one person who might help. Old Man Harrow, the village's reclusive artisan. He'd made the original chimes for Clara, or so the stories went. Tomorrow, Elias would seek him out. But for tonight, he'd hang this lone chime by the door, its melody a fragile shield against the dark. As he drifted to sleep, the chime's song filled the house, a lullaby tinged with warning. The entity was still out there, lurking in the silence between notes. And Elias knew, deep down, that the battle had only just begun. There's a saying in small villages like Elias's, every house has its story, but some stories are better left untold. Old Man Harrow's cottage was one of those stories, a crooked, ivy-choked relic at the edge of town, where the forest crept a little too close. The villagers whispered about him, a recluse, a genius, or perhaps a madman. But to Elias, he was hope. The morning after his encounter in the hollow, Elias set out at dawn, the lone wind chime's melody still echoing in his ears. He'd hung it by the front door, and for the first time in weeks, the house felt almost peaceful. Almost. The entity's presence lingered, a shadow just out of sight, but the chime had bought him time. Now he needed more. Harrow's cottage was a 30-minute walk, past fields and through a copse of birch trees. As Elias approached, he saw smoke curling from the chimney, a sign of life within. The door was ajar, creaking on its hinges. He knocked, but no answer came. Pushing it open, he stepped inside. The interior was a maze of clutter. Half-finished projects, tools, and strange contraptions littered every surface. Wind chimes dangled from the rafters, their tubes glinting in the dim light. Some were beautiful, others grotesque, twisted into shapes that seemed to defy nature. "Mr. Harrow?" Elias called, his voice swallowed by the silence. A rustle came from the back room, followed by a grunt. An old man emerged, his face a map of wrinkles, his eyes sharp despite their milky hue. He squinted at Elias, then snorted. "You're Clara's boy," he said, voice gravelly. "What do you want?" Elias swallowed. "I need your help. The wind chimes, my mother's chimes, they're broken, and I think something's wrong in our house." Harrow's eyes narrowed. "Wrong how?" Elias hesitated, then spilled it all. The storm, his mother's death, the whispers, the figure in the forest. As he spoke, Harrow's expression shifted from skepticism to something darker, something knowing. When Elias finished, the old man sighed, rubbing his temples. "You've stirred something old, boy. Something that should have stayed asleep. What is it?" Elias asked, dread pooling in his stomach. Harrow shuffled to a dusty bookshelf, pulling out a tome bound in cracked leather. He flipped through its pages, stopping at an illustration of a twisted, shadowy figure surrounded by symbols. "The Wraith of the Hollow," he muttered. "A spirit of sorrow and rage, bound to the forest by an ancient pact. It feeds on grief, slipping into homes where pain has cracked the door." Elias's heart sank. "That's what's in my house." Harrow nodded. "Your mother knew. That's why she hung the chimes. Their music disrupts its power, keeps it at bay. But when they broke..." The door opened. Elias finished, voice hollow. "Exactly." Harrow closed the book with a thud. "You've got one chime now, but it's not enough. You need a full set, tuned just right, to seal the house again. Can you make them?" Elias asked, hope flickering. Harrow's face darkened. "I can, but it's not that simple. The Wraith won't let you rebuild without a fight. It'll come for you, try to stop you." Elias's resolve hardened. "I don't have a choice. I have to try." The old man studied him, then nodded slowly. "All right, but you'll need to help. Fetch me the materials: bamboo from the grove, metal from the old mine, and shells from the river. And you'll need to learn the tuning. It's not just about the sound, it's about the intent." Elias agreed, and they set to work. The next few days blurred into a frenzy of activity. Elias scoured the village for the right materials, each trip a test of courage. The Wraith's presence grew stronger, its whispers louder, its shadows bolder. At night, the lone chime's song wavered, as if struggling to hold back the tide. One evening, as Elias returned with a bundle of bamboo, he found the front door ajar. His heart raced. He'd locked it before leaving. Cautiously, he stepped inside, the air thick with malice. The chime hung silent, its clapper missing. A low chuckle echoed from the shadows. "You think you can win, child?" Elias's blood ran cold. The Wraith was here, inside the house. He backed away, but the door slammed shut behind him. The temperature plummeted, frost creeping across the windows. "Show yourself," Elias demanded, voice shaking. The shadows coalesced into the familiar figure, its form more solid now, its eyes glowing with a sickly light. "You're persistent," it hissed, "but futile. The chimes won't save you." Elias's mind raced. He needed a weapon, something to fend it off. His eyes landed on a poker by the fireplace. He lunged for it, brandishing it like a sword. The Wraith laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think iron can harm me?" "No," Elias said, "but maybe this can." He swung the poker at the silent chime, striking its tubes. A discordant note rang out, sharp and jarring. The Wraith shrieked, recoiling as if burned. The sound wasn't melodic, but it was enough. Elias struck again, each clang driving the entity back. With a final, furious hiss, it dissolved into the shadows, leaving the house eerily still. Elias collapsed, trembling. He'd won this round, but the Wraith would return, stronger and angrier. He needed to finish the chimes fast. The next day, he delivered the last of the materials to Harrow. The old man worked tirelessly, his hands steady despite his age. Elias watched, learning the delicate art of tuning, how each tube had to resonate just so, how the symbols etched into them channeled protective energy. As they worked, Harrow shared more about the Wraith. "It's not just a spirit," he said. "It's a piece of the forest itself, a manifestation of its darkest heart. The pact that bound it was made centuries ago by villagers who feared its power. They used music, chimes, bells, songs to keep it contained. But over time, people forgot, and the forest grew restless." "Why did it choose my family?" Elias asked. Harrow's eyes softened. "It didn't choose you, boy. It was drawn to your sorrow. Your mother's death was the key that unlocked the door. But you're the one who can lock it again." Elias nodded, determination settling in his chest. He wouldn't let the Wraith win, not while he still had breath in his body. Finally, after days of labor, the new set of wind chimes was complete. They were beautiful, bamboo, metal, and shell, each tube inscribed with protective runes. Harrow handed them to Elias, his expression grave. "Hang them tonight," he instructed, "all around the porch, just like your mother did. And whatever you do, don't let the Wraith stop you." Elias took the chimes, their weight reassuring in his hands. "Thank you," he said, voice thick with emotion. Harrow waved him off. "Go on now. And be careful. The Wraith will be watching." As Elias left the cottage, the sky darkened, storm clouds gathering on the horizon. A chill wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. He hurried home, the chimes jingling softly in his bag. The house loomed ahead, its windows dark and unwelcoming. Elias steeled himself and stepped onto the porch. He began hanging the chimes, one by one, their melodies intertwining as they caught the breeze. With each chime, the air felt lighter, the shadows less oppressive. There's a strange thing about victory. It often feels like a pause, not an end. Elias learned that the hard way. After banishing the wraith of the hollow back to the forest, he thought he'd won. The house was quiet again. The wind chimes he'd hung with Old Man Harrow's helped sang their gentle song, and for a moment, he could breathe. At 72, he'd faced his childhood fear head-on and come out the other side. But deep down, a shadow lingered, a whisper of doubt that refused to fade. The first night after the confrontation, Elias slept like a rock, too exhausted to dream. The weight of decades seemed to lift, if only for a few hours. But the second night, the nightmares began. He was back in that storm from 60 years ago, the night his mother died. Lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the chaos outside their old farmhouse. He heard her scream, saw her silhouette against the flashing sky as she ran to save her precious wind chimes. And there, in the midst of it all, stood the wraith, its hollow eyes burning with hate. "You can't escape me," it hissed, its voice like gravel grinding against stone. "I am part of you now." Elias jolted awake, heart racing, the sheets damp with sweat. The wraith's words clung to him like a curse. Just a dream, he told himself, staring at the ceiling as the wind chimes tinkled faintly outside. But the fear stuck, a splinter in his mind. Over the next few days, the nightmares grew worse. Each night, he relived his mother's death, but now her face twisted in agony, her eyes accusing him. "Why didn't you save me, Elias?" she whispered in the dream. The wraith's laughter echoed, cold and relentless, its presence creeping closer. He felt its icy breath on his neck, even as he woke gasping. Sleep became a war, and Elias was losing ground. During the day, the house remained calm. The wind chimes' melody drifted through the air, a soothing balm to his frayed nerves. But Elias couldn't shake the feeling that the wraith was still there, lurking just beyond his sight, waiting for him to falter. Desperate for answers, he pulled on his coat and trudged back to Old Man Harrow's cottage at the edge of the village. The artisan was bent over his workbench, crafting a new chime from twisted metal and wood, his hands steady despite his years. "You're back," Harrow said without looking up, his voice gruff but not unkind. "The wraith's not done with you, is it?" Elias sank into a chair, shoulders slumped. "It's in my dreams. It says it's part of me. What does that mean?" Harrow set down his tools and turned, his weathered face softening. "The wraith isn't just a spirit from the forest, Elias. It's a mirror of our darkest selves, our grief, our guilt, the fears we bury deep. When it latches onto someone, it feeds on those emotions, grows stronger. You drove it from your house with those chimes, but it's still tied to you through your pain." Elias's stomach twisted. "So, it's my fault? Because I can't let go of my mother's death." "Not fault," Harrow corrected, his tone firm, yet gentle. "Grief is human. It's part of living, loving. But the wraith twists it, turns it into something toxic. To truly defeat it, you need to face your sorrow, your guilt, and make peace with them." "How?" Elias asked, his voice barely above a whisper, raw with exhaustion and doubt. Harrow leaned forward. "You remember your mother, not just the night she died, but who she was. Her life, her love for you. Forgive yourself for being a kid who couldn't save her. That's how you'll break the wraith's hold." Elias nodded, though uncertainty gnawed him. Could he really let go of the pain that had defined him for so long? He had to try. That evening, he returned home and sat on the porch, the wind chimes melody wrapping around him like a familiar embrace. He closed his eyes, focusing on the sound, letting it guide him into a deep, meditative state. Slowly, the world faded, and he slipped into a realm of memory and shadow, a place where the past and the supernatural collided. He stood in the storm again, rain lashing his face, the wind howling like a living thing. But this time, he wasn't a scared child hiding inside. He was himself, grown and determined, facing the night that had haunted him for decades. He saw his mother on the porch, reaching for the wind chimes as the gale tore at her. "Mom, don't," he called, but she couldn't hear him. This was a memory, frozen in time. Lightning struck, and she fell, her cry swallowed by the thunder. The wraith materialized, its form more solid, more menacing, feeding on the raw grief of that moment. "You see," it taunted, circling him. "Your pain keeps me alive. You'll never be free." Elias faced it, unflinching despite the ache in his chest. "You're wrong. My love for her is stronger than my pain, and that love will defeat you." The wraith sneered, its voice dripping with venom. "You could have saved her. You were too weak, too afraid." "No," Elias said, his voice steady. "I was a child. It was a storm, a force beyond me. She wouldn't want me to carry this guilt." The entity's eyes gleamed, predatory. "Then why do I still haunt you? Why do you still hear me?" "Because grief doesn't vanish," Elias admitted, meeting its gaze. "But I can choose how to hold it. I can honor her memory without letting you control me." As he spoke, the storm began to calm, the wind softening to a breeze. The wraith's form flickered, its edges blurring as its power waned. "You're lying to yourself," it spat, desperation creeping into its tone. Elias felt a warmth in his chest, a spark of peace igniting within him. "No, I'm finally telling the truth. You have no power here anymore." With a final, furious shriek, the wraith lunged at him, claws outstretched, but Elias stood firm. The entity shattered, dissolving into mist that the wind carried away. The dreamscape brightened, the storm clouds parting to reveal a clear, starlit sky. Elias opened his eyes, back on the porch, the first light of dawn painting the horizon in shades of gold. He felt lighter, as if a weight he'd carried for 60 years had finally lifted. The grief was still there, a quiet ache, but it was softer now, tinged with love instead of pain. The wind chimes' song drifted through the morning air, no longer a trigger of fear, but a comfort, a reminder of his mother's spirit, her laughter, the way she'd hum while tending her garden. From that day on, the nightmare stopped. Elias knew the wraith might still lurk in the forest, a shadow waiting for another soul to prey upon, but it no longer had a hold on him. He'd faced his darkness, both the entity and the guilt within, and found light on the other side. The wind chimes became his anchor, their melody a testament to his resilience. Life didn't erase the scars, he realized. They were part of him, like the lines etched into his hands from years of living. But scars could tell a story of survival, not just loss. Sometimes, healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering with love instead of fear. And in that shift, Elias found his peace. He stood, gazing out at the meadow stretching beyond the house, the grass swaying gently in the breeze. "I miss you, Mom," he whispered, "but I'll be okay. I promise." The wind chimes answered with a soft, clear note, as if she were humming back. There's a kind of magic in stories, don't you think? Not the kind with wands or spells, but the quiet sort that stitches wounds and mends what's broken. Elias discovered that magic on a crisp autumn evening, 65 years after the storm that stole his mother and his peace. He'd invited me to his porch, the same one where it all began, to share something he'd never told anyone. As we sat, the wind chimes, those delicate guardians he'd fought so hard to restore, hummed softly, their melody a comforting backdrop to the fading light. "I've been thinking," Elias said, his voice steady but laced with something deeper, "about why it took me so long to face this. Why I let fear rule me for 65 years. He glanced at the chimes, their tubes catching the last rays of sun. I thought they were a curse, a reminder of the worst night of my life. But maybe they were always a gift. I leaned forward, sensing the weight behind his words. What changed your mind? He smiled faintly. Let me tell you the whole story. From the beginning. And so he did. He spoke of the storm, the lightning that took his mother, and the wraith that slipped into his home through the cracks of his grief. He recounted the whispers, the shadows, and the chilling presence that haunted him for decades. As he talked, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves and setting the chimes into a livelier dance. Their song grew louder, almost urgent, but Elias pressed on, his voice unwavering. He described his journey into the hollow, the encounter with the wraith, and how he'd finally banished it with the help of Old Man Harrow's chimes. But even after that victory, the nightmares lingered, the wraith's voice echoing in his dreams. I am part of you now. It wasn't until I faced my guilt, Elias said, that I understood. The wraith fed on my pain, my belief that I could have saved her. But I was just a child. She wouldn't have wanted me to carry that burden. The wind howled suddenly, and the chimes clanged wildly, their melody turning chaotic. Elias paused, his eyes flicking to the sky. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and a chill crept into the air. But he didn't stop. I had to forgive myself, he continued, to remember her not just for how she died, but for how she lived, for the love she gave me. As he spoke, I noticed someone behind him, a shadow, tall and menacing, materialized at the edge of the porch. My heart lurched. It was the wraith, its form more solid than I'd imagined, its eyes burning with a cold, unnatural light. It reached for Elias, claws extended, but an invisible force stopped it. A barrier shimmering faintly, sparked by the chime's frantic song. Elias didn't see it. He kept talking, his voice calm, resolute. The wraith tried to convince me I was weak, that my grief made me vulnerable. But it was wrong. Grief isn't weakness. It's proof of love. And love is stronger than any darkness. The wraith snarled, its face contorting with rage. It pressed against the barrier, and the chime's notes grew sharper, almost painful. I wanted to shout, to warn Elias, but something held me back. This was his battle, his moment. He took a deep breath, his gaze distant. I spent 65 years running from that sound, from the memory of her. But now I see it differently. These chimes aren't a reminder of loss. They're her way of protecting me, even after she's gone. They're a song of love, not fear. With those words, the barrier flared bright, and the wraith let out a piercing scream, its form flickering like a dying flame. Elias's voice grew stronger. I'm not afraid anymore. You have no power here. The wraith's eyes locked onto mine, filled with fury and desperation. It lunged one last time, but the chime's melody swelled, a harmonious wave that crashed over it. The entity shattered, dissolving into wisps of shadow that the wind swept away. The air stilled, and the chimes returned to their gentle, soothing tune. Elias exhaled, a small smile tugging at his lips. It's finally over. I stared at him, my pulse still racing. Did you see it? He shook his head, his expression serene. No, but I felt it, like a weight lifting, a shadow leaving. It's gone now, for good. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the soft tinkling of the chimes. The sky cleared, and the first stars blinked into view. Elias looked out at the meadow, his eyes reflecting a peace I'd never seen in him before. You know, he said quietly, fear can twist our memories, make us see only the pain. But love endures. It's what keeps us going, what helps us heal. I nodded, the weight of his words settling in. It's funny how the things that scare us the most often hold the key to our freedom. You had to face the sound of those chimes to find peace. Exactly. He chuckled, a sound rich with relief. Took me 65 years, but I got there. As we sat there, wrapped in the fading light and the chime's gentle song, I realized something. Healing isn't about erasing the past, it's about changing how we carry it. Elias had transformed his pain into something beautiful, a melody that no longer haunted him but guided him home. And so, after 65 years, Elias finally understood. The wind chimes weren't just a memory of loss. They were a lullaby of love, a reminder that even in the darkest storms, there is light to be found.